Guild Wars 2 has many complicated systems such as templates, ascended crafting, and game balance between the separated game modes. While I enjoy the nuances of theory crafting builds for each situation I'm in because I have the luxury of legendary gear and the experience and knowledge of playing the game for many years, not everyone has the time or energy to do so and prefer to keep it simple. Despite many different opinions on what is best, at the end of the day, you decide what is optimal for you. However, when you only can choose one build since you may be starting out, it is much better to run a versatile build than an extremely specialized one, because you'll be able to succeed everywhere despite not being optimal everywhere, rather than being optimal in one area of the game and severely lacking in others. That is why I'll be showing off a Willbender build that uses only one set of gear with some different weapon options to be viable in all game modes so that you can enjoy the content of Guild Wars 2 without worrying about swapping or getting multiple sets of gear. All you need to do is change some traits and you can focus on what's fun. The Celestial Firebrand build is much better for team support, but when alone, many of the Firebrand virtues can be underwhelming, so the Celestial Willbender benefits solo players more. If the Selly Firebrand was called the Paladin, then the Selly Willbender must be called the Death Knight. Let's get started by explaining the Willbender mechanics. As a Willbender, your core Guardian mechanics of virtues will change to more mobile but more selfish abilities. Also, they will invert the passives. Normally as a Guardian you have the passives of the virtue, and you can decide to give up that passive for a more burst oriented effect at the cost of losing the passive. As a Willbender, you don't have a passive until you use the active, so you'll want to be using your virtues as often as possible to gain the benefits of both. You also get swiftness when using a virtue, so it keeps you moving quickly. Another reason why you want to keep using virtues as often as possible is because of the passive Willbender buff, Lethal Tempo. This increases your damage and condition damage and stacks up when you use a virtue or trigger one of the virtue passive effects. If this buff drops off, you need to ramp it up again, but if you keep using virtues and hitting enemies, you continue the buff's duration. An aggressive playstyle where you are constantly hitting enemies or using virtues in between being able to hit them will maximize your output. All of the virtues can be used without targets to be very mobile in any direction, and all virtues will leave behind Willbender Flames, which are just pulsing damaging areas that can help you land more attacks to trigger the virtue passives. You can choose what else you want your Willbender Flames to do with the traits: more burning, more power damage, and more sustain and healing. The F1 virtue, Rushing Justice, will rush towards a target and uppercut them for great power damage and burning damage. Hitting 5 times will trigger the passive effect, which will give out more burning and stack up Lethal Tempo. The F2, Flowing Resolve, is an evade that will remove all movement inhibiting conditions from you, such as cripple, immobilize, and chill. It will give you a bit of a heal on cast and will heal you further the more attacks you land to trigger the passive. You have 2 ammo for the skill, which means that you should always make use of the evade cooldown, but usually use this before another virtue because the passive effects of the virtues do not stack. You will only gain the passive of the last virtue you used. The F3 Crashing Courage is a teleport that can bring you up terrain so long as it's a valid path. It will do a decent amount of damage at that location and will give 1 Aegis and 1 stability initially, then give more Aegis and stability the more the passive triggers. For gear, I take full Celestial because it is the most versatile stat set and is quite overpowered in solo situations and can provide a supportive role in group situations, so long as your build can make use of all the different stats, which we will. The Defender rune gives more defensive stats and a lot more sustained healing because it heals whenever you block, and the F3 can provide many instances of Aegis, allowing you to go much more aggressive in the traits. Celestial and Defender runes require charged quartz crystals, time-gated materials to craft. If you need to get Celestial gear, the berry farm is the best way to get ascended trinkets fast, and just farm your daily charged quartz crystal in the home instance obelisk. Level 80 boosters will also give exotic celestial gear. There are some choices in the weapons. Your main weapon is going to be a main hand sword because it does multi-hitting attacks, which are great for triggering the virtue passives. Then take a main hand scepter, which will provide some range damage. Your offhands can be swapped around, but I take a torch and offhand sword. I typically use the torch with the sword main hand in PvE because it creates a high damaging weapon set, and the torch with the main hand scepter in World vs. World because the melee and range skills are organized together more efficiently. Put an energy sigil on both the main hands and a cleansing sigil on the sword offhand and a smoldering sigil on the torch. This means that you can swap the offhands freely while not messing with what sigil is in the weapons. The traits are the main areas where changes occur because you can do so freely out of combat. For open world PvE, take Radiance and Virtues. You get Fury when hitting enemies with 3 burn stacks, and you will get a second Zealot's Flame on your torch, as well as increased burning duration. Righteous Instincts gives you 25% more crit chance and Pulsing Might when you have Resolution. You gain Resolution whenever you use a Virtue due to the Virtue's traits, and you gain Resolution whenever you are hit when you have the Light Aura on, which you gain whenever you use your F1. Radiance gives you an extreme amount of offensive stats because of the increased crit chance from Fury and Righteous Instincts. You also get some crit chance from Radiant Power, Ferocity, and the burn duration increase from Radiant Fire just makes you do a lot of damage. But the Virtues trait line is where the utility comes in. Take Master of Consecrations to improve your Purging Flames, Absolute Resolve to give you 3 condition cleanse after using your F2, which already cleansed movement inhibiting conditions, so it will cleanse an additional 3 afterwards. Permeating Wrath will reduce the number of hits required to trigger the passive of Rushing Justice and make it hit multiple enemies. Because hitting multiple enemies will also trigger the passive much more frequently, this build excels at cleaving groups of enemies. In Willbender, take Conceited Curate for the great healing it gives you, since most PvE situations allow you to easily place these flames on multiple enemies, though you can take Searing Pact for more burns on your Willbender flames. Holy Reckoning for more might generation, and Tyrant's Momentum, which will improve the damage of lethal tempo and increase the duration of the Justice passive, which means more time to land more burns. However, lethal tempo will be reduced to 4 seconds duration, so you need to make sure to keep hitting things or using a virtue to upkeep the stacks. Your general skill priority is to use all of your multi-hitting abilities inside the duration of your F1 passive, so any pulsing damaging abilities should be used around the beginning of your F1 and longer cast times that deal their damage instantly near the end of it, because there will be a short window of time between your F1 casts where you won't get value from multi-hitting abilities triggering the burning passive. So the burst combo will be to use Purging Flames and your sword symbol, then use Rushing Justice. As soon as you Rushing Justice, you want to activate both your Zealot's Flames because they'll deal the most damage for how low cooldown and little time you must invest into them. Then use Whirling Light and Sword 3 for their multi-hitting abilities. By now, the passive should be wearing off, so you should save your sword symbol and any other multi-hitting attacks for when the F1 is up again. Use the torch for whenever though, because it will always deal good damage. You can get fancy by precasting your scepter into your sword burst, but generally you just want to use this for range damage. Torch 5 and the sword auto attack are also multi-hitting abilities, but they generally take a lot of time to invest into it, so only use this if you have nothing else or are saving your cooldowns for the Justice burst. And then use your Torch 4 off cooldown. If you're in danger, don't hesitate to use your F3 or F2 for more healing. Take Shelter for extra blocks, which will heal you, or Litany of Wrath for more healing in situations where you can reliably land damage. Stand Your Ground is a stun break that gives stability and more resolution, and your elite can either be Feel My Wrath, which is great to use before your burst so you can fit everything in the Justice passive window, or renewed focus, which will give you a lot of flexibility and survivability in higher stakes situations by giving you your virtues back. For group play in PvE, you can provide alacrity to your team by changing 2 traits and then using a different virtue. Take the battle presence trait in virtues, which will share your F2 passive to nearby allies, and then Phoenix Protocol, which will make your F2 passive give alacrity. Then just use F2 instead of F1 in the rotation, and then you can even stack both actives for a longer resolve duration. While this isn't the optimal DPS or the optimal amount of support for your team, it's a good balance of the two while helping you exist with a relatively forgiving build, which will suffice in 99% of situations. For World vs. World small scale and roaming, swap the torch and offhand sword so that you have a sword set and a scepter torch set. Since World vs. World is so open, it's hard to get value from purging flames because movement is so much more important. You can't expect to stand in or for others to stand in your purging flames. Swap the consecrations trait for unscathed contender and replace purging flames with judge's intervention to be able to take advantage of the mobility to chase targets, but also to escape by teleporting to neutral mobs or structures. Also, swap Unholy Reckoning to Vanguard Tactics because it will give 2 seconds of protection whenever you teleport. Your main burst combos rely on Immobilize to secure their damage. Both the Scepter 3 and the Sword 5 will immobilize the target. Once immobilized, you want to cast your F1 on them when they're in range, or your Sword 2 if you need to get closer. Use Whirling Light as soon as your F1 finishes. If this all lands, you've got Blind from your F1 trait, you've got Slow or Vulnerability depending on which weapon you use to immobilize, Weakness, and plenty of Burning. If they're still in range of you, then use the rest of your sword abilities, and then swap to Scepter to cast your Torch 4 from range. If they get out before then, just skip the sword skills and get right into the Scepter. From here, you can wait for your next set of cooldowns to do your next burst while kiting with your mobility. Remember that Scepter 3 and Sword 5 are your immobilizes, both with 20-second cooldowns, and that you should always start a combo with them, so don't throw them out randomly. As a Willbender, you want to be very aggressive because you have many ways to set up your combos, and eventually the enemies run out of cooldowns. If you miss your Sword 5 because they dodge it, then go in for the Scepter 3, and if both of your immobilizes miss, then just go in with your F1 into Whirling Light Burst anyways, because they're probably out of dodges anyways. And you just get kills through pressuring enemies until they run out of cooldowns, and then your damage ends up sticking. You can also play very defensively as a Willbender to survive because you can use your Sword 2 to port around to neutral mobs. You can use your mobility outwards rather than inwards to fights. And your Sword 3 is actually a projectile block, and there's a lot of projectiles in World vs. World, so using that strategically is really important. Not every situation is going to be in your favor though, and often you'll need to use your mobility to pick your fights. If you're outnumbered, then you want to be using your ports from your sword and Judge's Intervention towards the neutral mobs or structures around the map to get distance, and use your virtues and mobility skills to get away. And what I like to do is, when I'm outnumbered, I like to pretend that I'm going to engage in a fight and then just barely keep kiting them away and see how long they'll actually chase me. A lot of times there are differing levels of interest in the chase, and sometimes people will leave and others will continue chasing until a point where I feel comfortable that I can single one of them out, get the kill, and then when you've got the down, you can really go in for the cleave and sometimes get multiple kills like that. For PvP, go to the PvP panel to change your gear. Because we get so much crit chance from traits, Carrion Amulet is the best choice, although your crits won't hit that hard due to no ferocity. They add to your main damage source, which is burning, which is why you would take the Balthazar rune. Take Energy and Smoldering on both weapon sets to get 50% burn duration. You can go back to taking Purging Flames in PvP because fights often revolve around nodes, and you can get more value out of standing in your Purging Flames. So take the Consecration trait again, and you'll also take Indomitable Courage because the extra stun break is needed since Stand Your Ground is nerfed in PvP to a very long cooldown. Instead of Judge's Intervention, which is a great initiating tool but not so useful afterwards, you can take Roiling Light as a low cooldown stun break, and then use your F3 liberally and just save your Roiling Light as your stun break. The same combos apply in PvP as in World vs. World, except that you have Purging Flames, which is a fire field to combo with Whirling Light to give out a lot of burning. You're much less reliant on landing tons of Justice passive triggers due to not having Permeating Wrath, so you won't have the same insane cleave from just hitting multiple enemies, but it's still good enough, especially with Purging Flames. So the role of this build in Conquest PvP is a team fighter, DPS, that can give pretty good condition cleanse to its allies because the F2 ability will cleanse 3 conditions from nearby allies, and it has ammo, so you can use it multiple times. And you've also got Purging Flames, which cleanses a condition to allies that are inside of it. And you also have your Torch 5, which would cleanse conditions. So this is a very heavy team supportive condition counter in like larger fights with its team, but it's also pretty good at focusing targets down by immobilizing them for their team, because you've got the Sword 5, you've got the Scepter 3, and when enemies are immobilized, they can't dodge. So you really want to be calling targets so that your teammates will focus the same target as you, or get on your team's target and put that immobilized down, use your F1, and then use your Whirling Light, and that should do a lot of damage. Now, specifically, we're getting a focus on the enemy Harbinger, but I'm getting focus as well. So I enter into Renewed Focus, and I use my virtues to get to a safer positioning where I can still cleave the downed Harbinger while also avoiding getting focus there. But I see their Virtuoso and Herald are coming in, so instead of taking the 1v2 there, I go chase their Mesmer, I believe, their Mirage off node, which is a lot better than me staying there to be outnumbered. It's always pretty much better to be outnumbering than to be outnumbered, unless you can't get that kill when you're outnumbering. So we do eventually get that kill. I avoid dying by not going into a bad situation, using my mobility to choose my fights. And now I'm coming into home, but my Weaver is kind of in a losing 1v1. Not that the matchup is bad, but they're currently losing it. And we're in now a 2v2, and my Weaver is so pressured that it's very easy for the enemy team to focus them down, and there's not much I can do to peel for them because they've already gone down. I try to go for the res with Purging Flames, which can cleanse some conditions, but we're mostly fighting against a Dragon Hunter here, which is doing a lot of power damage. I get pulled by the Dragon Hunter, and I get bursted by the Harbinger at the same time, so that's really unfortunate that we did not escape there, even though I have my F3. But yeah, when your allies die there, you really want to escape from those situations. You're not very good at being outnumbered. You don't have the duelist's sustain because you want to be providing to your team. You scale up in larger fights, not in situations where you're tanking for the enemy team's cooldowns. So I do come back into home with my respawning Weaver, because this is our home node, so we have the advantage to, even if we lose that fight, we just push back in. We get the kill on their Dragon Hunter because we get some nice CCs, and I use my Whirling Light, and I see that the Fleshworm here, I can take that out so they can't use that later. My Reaper goes down in the courtyard there, but I do want to fight for the node. I don't know if I can help the Reaper there because there are 2 enemies here, but I see that they're all coming for me now, so maybe I can use my mobility to get to the res before they can react to it. But no, they are on top of me, and they have the CCs to prevent me from going for that res. But my allies do come back to aid us, So I'm going to come back in as well, and see that their Harbinger is pretty low. I go for my sword burst, but yeah, they have a lot of condition counter pressure, and I have 9 torment on me, so I'm forced to go into my invuln here. I use my virtues to get to a safer positioning, and my allies are able to finish the kill. Now, their Mirage meets me at mid to prevent me from taking the node, so I'm going to wait till I get out of combat, and my Weaver is going to come help me here as well. So as you can see here, we had a series of events happen. I went to help my Weaver and get them out of their 1v1 so that they can help me, and therefore I'm not 1v1ing, because I don't want to 1v1 as this build. So you always want to think about +1ing and kind of like securing kills for your teammates so that they can help you secure your kills as well. So that's kind of what we're doing here. We're getting advantages off of consecutive kills. Now we've got the node and their Mirage is going in stealth, so I'm not sure where I want to go. I don't want to stay there too long because then our team is going to be outnumbered elsewhere, but it does look like they're doing fine at far anyways, and I don't want to go cap far. So it looks like I don't need to be here either because they're doing fine here. So I look towards home, and home is not doing so well because they're a Reaper versus a Dragon Hunter. So they're taking a lot of pressure, but the Mirage is now pretty low from the 1v1 at mid. So I'm going in there for the kill secure. They're using a lot of mobility, but as a Willbender, I have a lot of mobility too to get the kill and chase this. Yeah, so they have a lot of respawn, so I have to be careful here, but I've invested so much into this kill anyways that I really want to go for it. They're doing a good job of kiting and wasting my time though, and at this point it's really not worth it, the time that I've invested in getting the kill, but since I've invested so much time already, I kind of need to get something out of it anyways. So not the best rotation, but it's better than nothing. So we at least got something there, even though it wasn't the best trade for my time. I do see that their Dragon Hunter is going into home, so I'm going to try to get the decap here. I dodged their true shot with my F2, and now I'm on top of them. They're blocking and using their F3, so I go behind terrain here to line of sight any like true shots they're going to shoot back at me. They back off because my Necro is on them, and I go for the decap. Their Herald's coming in to stop me, and I get off the node so that I have an advantage on the engagement, because if I stand on the node, then they get the engagement on me. So I let them stand on the node so I can engage on them. And they get some nice CCs on me, and they're a Condi Herald actually, so they can transfer my conditions, which is pretty scary. But because I have Purging Flames, I can just sit pretty in the middle of that and just get a lot of cleansing while I'm doing tons of burning damage. Now my Reaper is here again, but they're getting bullied by the enemy Dragon Hunter. I can't really do too much now that I'm 1v2 again, so I'm going to try to survive with my Elite and just use my F2 to get out. But I see that their Herald is trying to chase me. I play very aggressively by jumping on top of them and using my burns to essentially counter pressure them before they can react. Now the Dragon Hunter has to help their teammate, but I've got my Purging Flames down and my F3, so I've got plenty of stability and cleave, so they really can't do anything about it. And now this is an evened out fight where even my Necro is respawning because we're at our home node. So this is a good situation for us. However, their Mirage comes in and evens up the fight, so I have to play even more aggressively or the Reaper is going to get focused. But I land a really good Immobilize, and with my Reaper we focus the target down, get the kill, and I'm going to let my Reaper cap the node. But I see that they have 2 enemies coming in to assault my Reaper. Now, the Reaper is standing on the node for a little bit too long, so I have to play really aggressively to make up for their the amount of pressure that they're taking. So they're kind of fighting off node with the Mirage, and I should be probably peeling for the Necro harder here because, yeah, the Mirage is kind of low here, but they have ports to get out. And now I'm staying on the Herald because that's what's on our Reaper. So I'm just attacking whatever is attacking our Reaper. And if the Reaper can't focus a target with me, then yeah, the enemy team, you can see, they're not going to be able to well, they're going to be able to kill us before we get to kill on them because we're not focusing a target, whereas they are. None of them are focusing me. They're focusing the Reaper. So we're having some trouble focusing because the Reaper is so pressured in the 2v2, but I get the down and put down Purging Flames, so I'm doing pretty well here. I've got my block, so I can survive in my Purging Flames, which allows me to cleanse, and I have my F2, which cleanses me even further, and now I can play very aggressively with my Whirling Light. Put down my Sword Burst and Torch, get the Immobilize, and just gonna go invulnerable there just so that essentially the Condi Herald can transfer conditions back to me, so I tried to prevent getting transferred back to while my Torch 4 was pulsing burning on them. But at this point, we pretty much got the victory. Our Necro is going to go for the Beast there, and we're generally just going to hold this node until we win because we're about 50 points from winning. So that is pretty much how you play the Death Knight Celestial Willbender. It's a heavy DPS in PvE. It's got a lot of mobility for world versus world, and in PvP, it's got great support for its team. So yeah, that's pretty much how it's going to go. So if you like this content, subscribe for more, like the video, and if you want to support me further, consider becoming a patron. I would greatly appreciate it. With that being said, I will see you all next time.